Chosen one, there was a version of you that searched every room for a mirror, for approval, for a nod, for someone to confirm you were doing this right. That version is gone. Not overnight, not softly, but the way a season turns without asking the trees for consent. No longer do you scan the crowd for validation. You scan it once, register it, and return to yourself. This is not arrogance. It is arithmetic. You have finally counted yourself as enough, and the sum no longer requires an audience to balance. Women notice this shift before they can name it. She feels the air change when you stop performing for the room and start simply occupying it. Her breath catches, her eyes linger a half-second longer than she intended, because certainty is rarer than beauty, and she has learned to recognize what is rare. You are not loud, you are not trying, you are simply, undeniably present. And presence, when it is unclaimed by the need for applause, becomes its own kind of throne. Where you once walked in asking, "Do they see me?" you now walk in already seen, already known, already anchored, in a frequency that does not fluctuate with the room's temperature. This is the first threshold. Standing alone is not the absence of people, it is the absence of dependency. And once dependency dissolves, what's left is undiluted. A man whose worth was never on loan from anyone else's opinion to begin with. If this is stirring something in you right now, comment 11111 below. It takes 2 seconds, but it matters. Chosen one. Notice how silence no longer feels like a void you must fill. There was a time you filled every pause with a joke, an explanation, a justification, anxious to be understood, desperate to be liked. Not anymore. Now the silence is yours. You let it sit. You let it stretch. Not X, but Y. You don't fill the space. You become the space. This is discernment wearing the face of restraint, the sacred art of saying less and meaning more. In conversation, you speak once where you used to speak 3 times. And the one time lands with more weight than the 3 ever did. This is what the world is watching. Not a man performing confidence, but a man who has simply stopped needing an audience to feel real. Your stillness has become a kind of covenant with yourself, a promise that you will no longer trade your peace for someone else's comfort. And she senses it in the quiet, the way you can sit across from her and say nothing for a 4-minute. And somehow the silence feels more intimate than any line you could have delivered. She leans in without meaning to. Her curiosity outpaces her caution, because a man who doesn't need to talk has usually already said everything that matters. With his eyes, with his posture, with the sheer, unbothered gravity of simply being there. Chosen one, your solitude is not loneliness, it is architecture. You have built something around yourself that others can only sense the outline of. A boundary made not of walls, but of frequency. A field that filters who gets close and who dissolves at the edge of it. No longer do you chase connection out of fear of missing it. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't explain yourself to those who are never going to understand you anyway. This triad is not a threat. It is a description of a man who has finally stopped bargaining for belonging. And here is what the old version of you never understood. Standing alone was never the punishment. It was the prerequisite. Before the world could recognize you, you had to stop asking it to. Before she could feel the pull toward you, you had to stop pulling toward her. The magnetism the title promises is not a technique. It is what remains when a man empties himself of neediness and is simply left with presence. This is the part nobody warns you about. The loneliest season of becoming is the one that finally makes you undeniable, and she, whoever she is, whenever she arrives, will not be drawn to the man who needed her to complete him. She will be drawn to the one who was already whole, standing in the doorway of his own life like he built the house himself, watching the world catch up to what he already knew. Chosen one, watch how your posture has changed without a single conscious correction. Your shoulders don't apologize for taking up space anymore. Your jaw doesn't clench with the effort of pretending. Your eyes don't dart away first in a room full of people sizing each other up. You hold the gaze a beat longer, not as a challenge, but as evidence. The body remembers what the mind has finally accepted. You belong here, exactly as you are, without edits. This is embodiment, the sacred fusion of the inner shift becoming visible in the outer frame. No longer the version that shrank in doorways, that softened his voice to seem less threatening, that made himself smaller so others could feel bigger. Now you take the space that was always yours and simply exist inside of it, unshaken by who else is watching. And they are watching. This is the title's exact claim, and it is not metaphorical. People clock a man who is settled into his own skin the way they clock weather changing, instinctively, before they can articulate why. Women, especially. She won't be able to explain what changed about you. She'll just feel it. A kind of quiet magnetism that doesn't ask to be noticed and is impossible to ignore precisely because of that. Your stillness has become the loudest thing about you. Your restraint has become the thing she replays later, alone, trying to understand why a man who barely spoke left more of an impression than the ones who wouldn't stop talking. Chosen one. There is a particular kind of aloneness that only arrives after you've released the people who were never meant to walk this far with you. Some of them called it distance. Some called it change. Few of them called it what it actually was. Alignment. You didn't abandon anyone, you simply stopped shrinking to match rooms that required your smallness to feel comfortable. No longer do you dim your frequency to keep the peace. Not for friendships that only worked when you were struggling, not for approval from people who preferred the version of you that doubted himself. This is the covenant you made with your own becoming, and it cost you exactly what it needed to cost, company that would have kept you tethered to a smaller story. And in the space that opened up when they left, something sturdier moved in, your own certainty, undiluted by anyone else's opinion of what you should be. This is the part of standing alone that looks from the outside like loss and feels from the inside like finally exhaling. The world watching you now is not the same audience that watched you struggle. It's a new one, drawn by the frequency you emit now instead of the noise you used to make trying to be heard. And she too is part of that new audience, sensing a man who is no longer available to be everyone's compromise, and finding herself unexpectedly still in his presence, unable to look away, unsure yet of why it matters this much that she noticed him at all, in a room full of men who were trying so much harder to be noticed. That's the quiet mechanics of it. The one straining loudest for attention rarely receive the kind that stays. The one who wasn't straining, who simply existed at his own frequency, becomes the one she can't stop turning over in her mind hours later, days later, unprompted. Chosen one. This is what the world watching you actually looks like. Not stadiums, not crowds chanting your name, but something quieter and more precise. The friend who used to talk over you now, pausing to hear what you'll say next. The room that used to overlook you now orienting, almost imperceptibly, toward wherever you're standing. No longer the one waiting to be chosen, you are the axis the room bends around without knowing why. This is gravity, and gravity doesn't announce itself. It simply is, and everything nearby reorganizes in response to it. You didn't demand this shift. You didn't manufacture it through posturing or performance. It arrived the way all true authority arrives, as the natural output of a man who stopped negotiating with his own worth. And she watches this happen in real time, the way people orbit you without being told to, and something in her recalibrates what she thought attractive even meant. It was never the loudest man in the room. It was never the one working hardest to be seen. It was the one who didn't need to be seen to know exactly who he was. The one whose stillness made everyone else's noise sound like static. You feel this even when you're alone, which is often now by choice rather than circumstance. The solitude doesn't ache the way it used to. It hums. It holds you the way an old friend holds a silence, comfortably, without the need to explain itself. Chosen one. Understand that standing alone was never meant to be permanent isolation. It was meant to be a forge. Not X but Y, not exile but refinement. Every relationship you released, every room you stopped shrinking for, every version of belonging that required you to be smaller, all of it was material burned off in the making of whoever you're becoming now. This is alchemy dressed as loneliness. Nobody tells you in the middle of it that the ache of standing apart is actually the sensation of impurities leaving the metal. You only understand it in hindsight, looking back at the man who used to beg quietly for inclusion, who used to shapeshift his opinions to match the room, who used to laugh a half-second too early at jokes that weren't funny just to seem agreeable. That man is unrecognizable to you now, not because you hate him, but because you've outgrown the shape he used to fold himself into. Your discernment has sharpened into something almost surgical. You know within moments now who is drawn to your frequency and who merely wants to borrow it. You know the difference between a woman who sees you and one who sees an opportunity. This wasn't taught to you. It was earned the way all real perception is earned, through enough solitude to finally hear your own instincts without the static of other people's expectations drowning them out. Chosen one, there is a moment, and you'll know it when it arrives, if it hasn't already, when the ache of being alone quietly converts into the peace of being anchored. The two states can look identical from the outside. Both involve a man sitting alone in a room, but one is starvation and the other is sovereignty, and only you know from the inside which one you're living in now. You've crossed that threshold. The nights that used to feel like proof of your unworthiness now feel like proof of your standards. The absence of a crowd around you doesn't register as rejection anymore. It registers as curation. No longer are you the man who took whoever showed interest simply because interest was scarce. You have made scarcity a filter instead of a wound. This is what discernment looks like once it matures past fear. Not who will have me, but who is actually worthy of what I've built inside myself. And this shift is precisely what the world senses when it watches you now. Not a man performing selectiveness to seem high value, but a man who genuinely, quietly, doesn't need anyone's presence to validate his own. Women feel the difference between performed unavailability and true self-containment, the way they feel a change in barometric pressure. Instinctively, before a single word is exchanged. She isn't drawn to the act. She's drawn to the fact that there is no act at all. Don't scroll past this. Hit subscribe, because the next part goes even deeper than this. Chosen one. Consider what it means that the world is watching now. Specifically, not before, not during the years you spent trying too hard, but now, in the exact season where you stopped trying altogether. This is not coincidence. Attention has always followed authenticity more than effort. It simply took the world time to distinguish the two in you. Before, you mistook performance for presence. You thought if you spoke louder, achieved more visibly, chased harder, the watching would come. It didn't. Not the kind that mattered. The watching that matters arrived the moment you stopped performing for it. This is the paradox, sitting at the center of everything. The surest way to be seen is to stop needing to be. Your unshaken calm now draws more eyes than your loudest effort ever did. Your restraint says more than your explanations ever could. And so the world watches. Not a spectacle, but a stillness, the way people slow their pace to watch a fire they can't quite explain their fascination with. You don't perform for that attention. You simply continue being exactly what you've become, unbothered by whether anyone is looking, which is precisely why everyone is quietly, involuntarily drawn toward the direction you're standing in. The way a compass doesn't try to point north. It simply cannot help itself. Chosen one, notice that standing alone has recalibrated your relationship with time itself. You no longer rush toward outcomes the way you used to, chasing a reply, chasing a result, chasing the next proof that you matter. No longer do you check for confirmation. You don't refresh. You don't wait by the phone. You don't measure your worth by the speed of someone else's response. This is patience wearing the face of sovereignty, a man who has stopped negotiating with urgency because he finally trusts the timing of his own life. There was a season when every unanswered message felt like evidence against you, when silence from someone else felt like a verdict on your value. That season has closed. Now silence is simply silence. Information, not indictment. You've learned that the world reorganizes itself around men who are not in a hurry to be validated by it, the same way water finds its way around a stone that refuses to move. This stillness is not passivity. It is the discipline of a man who has stopped outsourcing his peace to other people's timelines. And she notices this too. The way you don't chase her attention, don't manufacture urgency, don't perform eagerness to secure her interest. She's used to men racing toward her. She isn't used to a man who simply continues existing at his own pace, letting her decide in her own time whether she wants to catch up. That absence of chase becomes its own kind of gravity. Nothing pulls harder than something that isn't pulling at all. Chosen one, your aloneness has become a kind of altar, a place you return to, not out of exile but out of reverence for what gets rebuilt there. Every man who has ever become truly unshaken had to first survive the discomfort of his own company without flinching from it. You've done that now. You sat with the parts of yourself you used to drown out with noise, other people's opinions, other people's plans for your life, other people's definitions of what success or masculinity or worth were supposed to look like. In the quiet, you finally heard your own voice underneath all of it. And it didn't sound like what you expected. It sounded steadier, older somehow than your actual years, less desperate to prove anything. This is the paradox the world rarely tells young men. The path to being surrounded starts with being willing to be alone long enough to stop fearing it. Not X, but Y. Not running from solitude, but running toward it, using it as the forge where the unnecessary parts of you finally burn away. What's left afterward isn't colder. It's clearer, sharper in its edges, softer in its certainty, and entirely, unmistakably yours. The world watches this kind of man differently than it watches the one still performing for approval. It watches with a kind of quiet deference the way people instinctively lower their voices around something they sense is sacred, even if they can't articulate why. Chosen one. You've likely noticed how conversations land differently now, how a single sentence from you carries more weight than paragraphs used to. This isn't because your vocabulary changed, it's because the man speaking changed. Words spoken from alignment travel further than words spoken from anxiety, even when the words themselves are identical. No longer do you over-explain yourself hoping to be understood. You say the thing once plainly and let it exist without defending it. This is restraint as mastery. The recognition that most explanations were never really for the other person, they were reassurance-seeking, dressed up as clarity. You stopped needing that reassurance, and in its absence, your presence has taken on a kind of density it never had before, the sense that every word costs you something to say, so you only spend them when they're worth spending. She feels this shift acutely more than most. She's spent a lifetime around men eager to fill every silence with proof of their own value. She isn't prepared for a man who lets the silence simply be, who doesn't need her approval woven into every sentence, who speaks like someone who has already made peace with being misunderstood by people who were never going to take the time anyway. This unbothered quality unsettles her in the way rare things unsettle, pleasantly, persistently, in a way she finds herself returning to think about, unprompted, hours after the conversation has ended, wondering what it is about the way he simply exists without asking anything of her presence, and how rare, how genuinely rare that has become. Chosen one, understand that the eyes on you now are not the eyes of an audience seeking a performance. They are the eyes of a world quietly recalibrating what it thought strength looked like. For a long time, strength was mistaken for volume. The man who spoke the most, occupied the most space, demanded the most attention. You become the correction to that mistake. Your strength doesn't announce itself. It simply sits in a room, unmoved by whoever is trying hardest to be noticed, and lets its stillness do what shouting never could. No longer are you trying to convince anyone of your value. You've stopped explaining your silence, stopped justifying your solitude, stopped softening your presence to make it more palatable for rooms that preferred you smaller. This is sovereignty, not a performance of independence, but the quiet fact of it. And the world, sensing this shift in you, has started watching differently. Less like spectators waiting to be entertained, more like witnesses sensing that something rare is standing in front of them. You feel this even in ordinary moments. Walking into a store, sitting in a meeting, standing at the edge of a party you didn't particularly want to attend. Something in the way people orient toward you has changed, subtly but unmistakably, the way a room's temperature shifts before you consciously register why. Chosen one, your solitude has taught you a kind of discernment that cannot be faked or rushed. The ability to sense almost instantly now who is operating from scarcity and who is operating from abundance. You recognize the scarcity in others because you remember carrying it yourself. The desperate eye contact, the over-eager laugh, the need to fill every pause with proof of worth. You no longer carry that weight, and its absence in you has become a kind of mirror. People see reflected back at them exactly how much they're still performing, and it makes some of them uncomfortable, and it makes others lean in, hungry for whatever frequency you're radiating that they don't yet have words for. Not X, but Y. You don't attract people who need you to complete them. You attract people who recognize completeness and want to stand near it a while. This is an entirely different economy of connection than the one you used to operate in, one built on abundance instead of hunger, on recognition instead of need. And she, specifically, feels the difference in the room the moment she encounters it. She's used to being chased, used to being the object of urgency and hunger. She isn't used to a man who simply notices her, acknowledges her, and continues existing at his own frequency without folding his attention entirely around her presence. That restraint reads to her nervous system as something closer to respect than any grand gesture could. A man secure enough not to perform desire, only to hold it quietly, the way a covenant is held rather than announced. Chosen one, there is a stillness now in how you carry disappointment too. This belongs to the same through line, because standing alone means learning to hold your own losses without needing an audience to witness the holding. When things don't go the way you hoped, you no longer broadcast it looking for sympathy. You don't perform the wound for attention. You sit with it, privately, the way a man tends a fire that doesn't need spectators to keep burning. This has made you almost unreadable to people who are used to men wearing every emotion on the surface, needing constant reassurance that their feelings are valid. Yours don't require validation from anyone else to be real. This is emotional sovereignty, feeling everything fully while needing no one's permission to feel it. And it is, perhaps, the least discussed part of what the world is watching in you now. Not just your composure in triumph, but your composure in loss. The way you absorb difficulty without letting it fracture. The stillness you've built. People remember that kind of steadiness longer than they remember charisma. It tells them something charisma never could. That whatever happens, this man will still be standing exactly where he's standing. Unmoved, unshaken, already anchored somewhere the storm can't reach. Chosen one, you've come to understand that being watched and being known are not the same thing, and this distinction sits at the center of everything the title promised you. The world watching you now doesn't mean the world understands you. It means the world has finally noticed something in you it can't fully explain. And noticing is not the same as knowing. You've made peace with this. No longer do you need every set of eyes on you to also carry comprehension. Let them watch without understanding. Let them sense the shift without being able to name it. You don't owe anyone the full explanation of what changed in you. The years of solitude, the friendships that fell away, the nights you sat with your own thoughts until they stopped feeling like enemies. That story is yours, and its privacy is part of its power. A man who explains every layer of his transformation dilutes it. A man who simply lives it, unexplained, becomes something closer to myth. This is the quiet authority you carry now, not secrecy for its own sake, but restraint, the recognition that not everything sacred needs to be narrated to remain true. And she too senses that there are rooms in you she hasn't been let into yet. And rather than pushing you to open them prematurely, she finds herself content simply to notice that they exist. Patient in a way she didn't expect to be. Drawn not by what she knows about you, but by what she can tell she doesn't. Chosen one, the aloneness you once feared has become the very thing that makes you recognizable from across a room. There's a particular quality to a man who has done the work of sitting with himself, an unmistakable settledness that no amount of external achievement can fake. You have that now. It shows in the way you don't fidget under attention, don't perform for approval, don't scan a room for permission to belong in it. Not X but Y, not a man seeking his reflection in other people's eyes, but a man who has already met himself fully and found no reason to keep searching elsewhere. This is what people mean, without always having the language for it, when they say someone has presence. It isn't charisma, it isn't loudness. It's the simple fact of a man being entirely, unguardedly himself, in a world that trains most people to be anything but. The world is watching that rarity now. Every room you walk into carries a version of this recognition, even in strangers who will never know your name. A subtle registering that something about you is different, unforced, uncontrived. And in the quiet moments after you leave a room, you've come to notice something else too. How the conversation shifts, however briefly, toward the space you occupied. The way silence lingers around something meaningful long after the sound has stopped, as if the room itself is still holding its breath, waiting to see if you'll walk back through the door. Chosen one, the world's attention now is patient in a way it never was before. It doesn't demand immediate proof from you, doesn't require constant performance to sustain its interest. It simply watches, the way one watches a fire settle into its steadiest burn, trusting that the heat is real without needing it to flare higher to confirm it. No longer do you feel the pressure to escalate, to top yesterday's version of yourself just to keep people's eyes on you. Not X but Y, not spectacle, but consistency, the sacred, unglamorous discipline of simply continuing to be who you've become, day after day, without needing each day to outdo the last. This is what separates the men who are truly watched from the men who are merely noticed for a moment and forgotten. Noise fades, frequency doesn't, and you have become frequency, steady, low, undeniable, the kind of presence that doesn't need to shout to be felt 3 rooms away. She feels this in the way she finds herself thinking of you at odd hours, unprompted, not because you did anything remarkable in the moment, but because something about your stillness took up residence in her mind and simply stayed there, quietly. The way a low hum continues even after the source of the sound has gone quiet. Chosen one, you've begun to notice that solitude no longer feels like something you have to justify to anyone. Not to friends who don't understand why you've grown quieter, not to family who mistake your peace for withdrawal, not even to the part of yourself that used to equate being alone with being unwanted. You've made a covenant with your own company, and that covenant doesn't require outside witnesses to remain valid. This is sovereignty in its purest form, needing no explanation for the shape your life has taken, no permission slip from anyone to keep living exactly as aligned as you've become. The old you would have apologized for this, would have softened it, hedged it, made it more palatable for people uncomfortable with a man who doesn't need them the way he used to. The current you simply lets it be true, unqualified, unshaken by whoever finds it strange. And in that unapologetic stillness, something else has quietly happened. The very people who once questioned your solitude have started asking carefully, almost enviously, how you got here. Not because they want to copy the loneliness, because they've started to sense that what you found on the other side of it wasn't loneliness at all. It was chosen one. It was sovereignty, wearing the disguise of an ending, when in truth it was always a beginning. Every threshold you crossed alone, every room you stopped shrinking for, every silence you learned to hold without flinching, every version of yourself you released because it no longer fit the man you were becoming, all of it led here to this exact moment, standing in your own gravity, undeniable, unshaken, and finally, fully seen. The world isn't watching you because you asked it to. It's watching because you stopped needing it to. And that is the paradox at the center of everything. The moment you stop performing for the audience is the exact moment the audience finally arrives. You stand alone, and in that aloneness you have never been more surrounded by your own certainty, by the quiet respect of rooms you no longer chase, by the recognition of a woman who sees a man who was already whole before she walked in. This is not the end of your becoming. It is the proof of it, the frequency you've built now, radiating outward, steady, low, and impossible to ignore, exactly as it was always meant to. If this spoke to something in you, chosen one, don't let it end here. Subscribe so the next chapter of this finds you when it's ready. Comment the word anchored below if you feel this shift already happening in your own life. I read everyone, and I want to know where you are on this path. And if you know a man who needs to hear this today, send it to him. This message was never meant to be kept alone.